one day we will have 2 big buildings in Abuja where we'll have places where we put pictures of people, even if they are dead, and say these are the people who really messed up this country. So that their grandchildren will come and know that their grandfathers were part of the problems of the country.
Barrister, did you hear him?
Of course, I heard him.
So for viewers, that was by President.
Well, if you when I
so what he just suggested is the museum of the corrupt.
Museum, yes, of
the corrupt.
Yes, a museum of the
now,
corrupt.
Yeah.
When you have that museum, when I first heard that statement, I said, when you have such a museum, there's nobody that will not be there. You cannot look and think of any Nigerian leader that would not be in that.
Basically, all Nigerian leaders. But my own problem, why I play this video is because if you watch the clip, I don't know if you took note that this man did not add himself, he did not include himself. Because that was why I played this video. I said, look at this man. He's shooting himself. Nobody, I don't know. He just shot himself in the foot. Because good luck when it comes to corruption. We all know. I remember you and I talked about this, and this is the reason. Unfortunately, this is the reason why I supported Buhari then. Unfortunately, regrettably, I forgot. I supported him. Jonathan was the reason why I supported Buhari. You were against him, even though you acknowledge the weakness and the corruption in Jonathan's leadership. It was his own government was he himself, as the president, wasn't in control of his government. Some of the corruption, he didn't even know what was going on. And some of them, he was aware of it. In fact, in the corruption, I bet I believe you will agree with me on this, that even as the president, he was involved, he was corrupt, but honestly, his subordinates or his kitchen cabinet, they out-corrupted, they out-corrupt him, or rather, they outweighed him in corruption. That is just right, because some of them, like Desiani, obviously everyone knows that Desiani was much, I don't know of now, he was much richer than Jonathan, even in Jonathan's corruption. So now coming to tell us that you create, Jonathan said, okay, he suggested the creation of the museum of corrupt leaders without including himself. If you watch that clip, he didn't insinuate himself to be on that list. I expect Jonathan to be on the forefront of that list. Barrister, what's your take?
That is there. Number one, who will determine whose name will be entered in the museum? Who will determine that? Number two, what is the criteria that will be used? Because we know that corruption is not just the theft of money. There are various other corruption, nepotism, favoritism, and the rest. There are also corruption in themselves. So if, like I said before, if that museum is open, no Nigerian leader will escape it. Not one, including Obasanjo. None of them will escape that museum.
No, hold on.
We have to enter that.
No, hold on. Let's define this whole museum thing. Now, let's take, for instance, the real museum that we all know. Usually we put those things, not the things we put, what we actually display in museums are icons, are things that are either people or images or icons that have impacted either humanity or life in one way or the other in a very, very significant way. So those that are at the extreme, at the top level of recognition are those things or people that are at the top level of recognition are the ones that are placed there as museum. Otherwise, if we want to categorize it based on what you just said, it means that museums cannot contain, we'll be having an entire city becoming a museum. museum cannot contain everybody, everything and everyone.
Even if we use a restricted meaning of corruption, as you are saying,
yes,
I do not see anybody, any Nigerian leader that will be outside it. To be
no,
honest,
honestly,
I cannot see
no, I
any
disagree
Nigerian
with you on
leader
this.
that will be
Honestly,
outside that.
no, I disagree with you on this. Now, if we are to categorize it on my own, what I just mentioned, on the norm, that thing that well, it's not even in my opinion. That is the norm, because the norm is they take the highest of the highest, the highest of the highest, the best of the best, and make. That's why we have museums are small. They are not that massive. A sort of not an entire city. A sort so that is just it. So if we are to narrow it to the way museum is made, honestly, in my own opinion, someone like Obasanjo, as corrupt as he was, honestly, Obasanjo will be out of that list. I'm telling you. Obasanjo, let me tell you one thing. You and I agree on this. The Obasanjo had good intention for Nigeria. Honestly, that man had sincere intention for Nigeria. Obasanjo genuinely actually wanted, he played even that during this democratic, even as a military man too, military head of state, and as a democratically elected president, Obasanjo played a level of selflessness. Honestly, let's even take note. Let's take note of all our head leaders, presidents and heads of states. Who, in your own judgment, who do you think played at least an iota of selflessness more than Obasanjo?
What? So, calculating from Buhari, I mean from Babangida,
yes,
to no, from
let's start from what's his name? Agui Ronsi, the military head of state. Let's start from his own to go on.
I think we have to be a bit more careful. Those leaders, Agui Ronsi, Tafawa Balewa, Sadano of Sokoto, in terms of physical corruption, let's be honest, they were not that corrupt.
No,
you can see even
the civilian leadership. No, they were not. Those three people, no, you mentioned.
In terms
they were
of
not.
corruption, they were not.
That's why I mentioned we should start from Agui Ronsi, the military. That is after
Agui Ronsi, Gawan,
civil rule.
Agui Ronsi up to Gawan, up to Murtala Muhammad. We can put them out as leaders who did not corruptly.
Now hold on. Now let me ask you something. I said something. I made mention of something. Apart from, there are two things when it comes to corruption. There are people who are not corrupt, but they don't care. They are not patriotic. They don't care what happens. They are, because naturally they don't believe in personal aggrandizement. They don't believe in ostentative lifestyle. Their lifestyle is simple, so they don't care about money. They are not whatever. So naturally, they are not corrupt. Just like the Hamid Ali's, the Jafar Isas, and Angiwa Umar, all those guys, and the Tafawa Balewa, Nnamdi Azikiwe, all those whatever. They might not be corrupt, but what of patriotism? Now, you remember I said something. Somebody might not be corrupt, but not patriotic. Person like Obasanjo, okay, he was corrupt to a level. But patriotism, you could sense it, you could feel it, that this man actually desired for Nigeria to move forward. He was selfless in some cases. He really needed needed Nigeria to be better than what it was. Now, who can you liken him to? Okay, Murtala too was something like that. Go ahead, please.
The leaders of Nigeria into two. From independence up to Murtala Muhammad, and from Obasanjo up to Tinubu. That's my way.
Okay, go ahead.
From the time of Yakubu Gowon backwards, I can say convincingly that these leaders were not corrupt. They were also patriotic in certain ways. If you talk of Sedana when he is referring to the North, It's not as if it was not a patriotic thing, but then the feeling then of backwardness of his area that had to be made to catch up. So you have to excuse him for that. Excuse the leaders from independence up to Gawan's leadership. Take it from Obasanjo up to the present. Between Obasanjo as military president up to Tinubu, there is no president that is comparable to Obasanjo. That is the truth.
Yeah, okay, I agree with you on
From military president up to down. And the worst, in my estimation, from Obasanjo to president, the worst is Babangida, followed by Abacha, followed by Buhari, and now followed by Tinubu. That is the way I will rate them.
In the corruption index.
In the corruption, in the corruption index. That's the way I will rate them.
So you don't even see Tinubu as the worst of all?
Well, you know, this thing is progressive. I always tell people back in 1980, and I always give an example. As corrupt as the MPA government was, then there was fear. There was still fear. There were still honorable people in the government of Shagari, because I know incidences where the president Shagari asked some ministers to award contract for the purposes of taking 10% and compensating people like Saraki, and they refused. They said, look, Mr. President, I cannot do that. That back then, the corruption was 10% of kickback of a contract. It was not open theft, go to treasury and just take money as we see today. It was not open theft. You have to generate a contract and get 10% of it as kickback. So there was still some measure of what we call fear of God in people.
Yeah.
Gradually, the one that now shattered every glass ceiling in terms of corruption, and that's why I rate him number one, is Babangida. He shattered every norm, every moral pedestal, everything, glass ceiling that you think in terms of corruption. It was shattered in the time of Babangida. That is the reason why I rate him number one, because he opened the door as wide as...
Okay, I understand what you mean, because he was the one who laid the foundation of this kind of corruption, this level of corruption.
Opened the door for progressive corruption. That is, after every government, the next one becomes worse than the one that came. So that is why I rate him as number one. But maybe in terms of volume, the volume of corruption, we can only say, as between Abacha and Tinubu, is difficult to say. Let me put it.
Oh my God.
let me be frank. I will just say it like that.
Okay, because now remember, let's juxtapose both of them. Juxtapose Tinubu with what's his name, Abacha. Remember, Abacha was a military head of state. Tinubu. So if we are going to put it that way, honestly, Tinubu is the worst, or is a worse criminal than Abacha, because Abacha was a head of state. It's a dictator. It's under dictatorship, so he can just instruct, do this and do that. But under democratic, the so-called sham we call democratic dispensation of Tinubu, for God's sake, Tinubu is literally doing exactly what Abacha as a military head of state did. So that is why, to me, okay, I understand why Babangida is your number one. Yes, it's the foundation. He laid the foundation. He opened the door, as you said, door to all this nonsense that we have experienced today. Okay, I agree with you on that. But technically, when it comes to volume and the extremity of corruption, Bola Tinubu is I don't think we ever had it. It's just the worst of all. It's just the worst of all. And going back to our leaders now, our founding leaders, I have problem with them because just like you mentioned, corruption comes in diverse ways. You don't necessarily have to necessarily have to steal money to be a corrupt person. There are several other ways. What you mentioned, Saldana. Saldana was, I consider that as corruption, because if you are a segregationist, I honestly, that's corruption. That's a corruption in its own. Saldana, just like you said, he was patriotic. He was patriotic not for to Nigeria as a country. He was patriotic to the North. And that is just that to me, honestly, these three founding fathers, Nnamdi Azikiwe is even, I can excuse him because he was like a fiddle, a second fiddle then. He wasn't his own say, he wasn't that much powerful.
He was a ceremonial president.
Yes, so he wasn't that powerful or whatever. So that his own is on. Honestly, Nnamdi Azikiwe didn't play all those their nonsense politics. Let's be fair. The people who played serious role in what we are facing today is the Sardana of Sokoto and Tafawa Balewa. They were the ones who connived with the West, with the British colonial masters to do what, to perpetuate perpetuate this unfairness in our system. So I understand you excusing Sardana. Sardana is even, to me, honestly, he's the major reason why Nigeria is where we are today. That is just so. I'm going by foundation, as you mentioned. Honestly, these are our founding fathers, especially Sardana. He is just the main culprit here, sort of. So anyway, when it comes to financial corruption, Tinubu is the grandmaster of all. That is just it.